So our whole analysis today is built on the work of Carlos Yebra Lopez, specifically his book Ladino on the Internet. It's really the first critical look at Ladino's online revival. And its core argument is a game changer. The web isn't just a tool for Ladino speakers anymore, it has become their primary home, kicking off a totally new stage in the history of the Sephardic diaspora. All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with the historical journey, from physical homeland to a global diaspora. Then we'll introduce this core concept of Sepharad 4, breaking it down by its tech stages, the early days of Web 1.0, the social explosion of Web 2.0, and then we'll peek over the horizon at what Web 3.0 might hold.
Okay, so to really grasp the significance of a digital homeland, you first have to understand the loss of a physical one and what's truly at stake for the Ladino language.
The story really starts with Ladino itself, which you might also know as Judeo-Spanish. This is the language that was born in the Iberian Peninsula and then carried into exile by the Sephardic Jews after they were expelled way back in 1492.
So, the history of this diaspora is usually seen in three main stages, all before the internet. Sepharad 1, that's the long period of settlement in Iberia. Sepharad 2 kicks off with the trauma of 1492 as these communities rebuilt their lives around the Mediterranean. And Sepharad 3, well, that's the more recent global scattering after World War II, especially to places like Israel and the Americas.
And that brings us to today, where the situation is, well, it's pretty critical. According to the 2024 data from Ethnologue, there are only about 51,000 Ladino speakers left in the entire world.
Now that number tells a story. It's why UNESCO classifies Ladino as severely endangered. The main reason? There's been a near-complete breakdown in passing the language from one generation to the next. The language is, to put it simply, right on the edge.
And this is where our story takes a fascinating turn. Faced with this existential threat, a whole new stage of the diaspora has started to emerge. It's one that isn't defined by geography, but by connectivity. This is Sepharad 4.
This quote really gets to the heart of Yebra Lopez's thesis. It flips the old academic assumption on its head. People used to see Ladino as an offline language that was just supplemented by the internet. But the argument here is the exact opposite. The internet is now the main stage, the primary place where the community comes together and the language really lives.
So Sepharad 4 is way more than just Ladino on the internet. It actually signals a fundamental rewiring of the diaspora itself. It's an online-first existence where a new form of the language, what you might call a cyber vernacular, is being forged in real time.
So let's trace how this digital homeland actually evolved. We'll start at the very beginning, in its earliest phase, which aligns perfectly with the text-based internet of Web 1.0.
The key difference to get here is the shift from a read stage to a social stage. Web 1.0 was basically all text, email lists, forums. You could read and you could write back. But Web 2.0, as we're about to see, just blew that wide open into this fully interactive multimedia world.
Back in the 90s, the pioneers of Sepharad 4 used the tools they had. And what they had were text-based email lists, like the famous Ladino Comunita, which was founded in 1999. These became these vital circles of correspondence. This model, where many could talk to many, allowed a scattered population to connect, and in doing so, they created the very first Sephardic digital homelands.
And that brings us to this incredible concept of the digital homeland. It's a term coined by the scholar Tamar Held, and it defines these spaces as so much more than just websites. They are virtual territories that act as replacements for lost physical homelands. They allow for a fragmented identity to be pieced back together and for a new, collective memory to be built.
So if Web 1.0 laid the foundation, then Web 2.0 built a sprawling, vibrant city right on top of it. This is the social multimedia stage that, let's be honest, most of us are very familiar with today.
The shift was just massive. All of a sudden, Ladino wasn't just text anymore. It was video archives on YouTube preserving the voices of elders. It was community building in Facebook and WhatsApp groups. You could learn it on apps like UTalk. And crucially, it was live face-to-face interaction during the Zoom boom, and even popped up in global pop culture, like the Netflix series Cool Loop.
And the pandemic, for all its tragedy, it was a massive accelerator for this. As the world went into lockdown, the Ladino-speaking community, which is full of elderly and geographically isolated people, went online like never before. This Zoom boom sparked what some activists have called a full-blown renaissance, connecting generations and continents in a way that was impossible before.
Now, The most important linguistic thing to come out of all this interaction is a process called Cyber-koinesation. It's fascinating. You have speakers from all these different historical dialects, from Turkey, Greece, Morocco, all interacting online. And through this constant digital contact, they unconsciously start to negotiate and standardize parts of the language, forging a new, common, digitally native dialect of Ladino. The internet itself is the melting pot.
Okay, so now let's look forward. If Web 1.0 was about reading and Web 2.0 was about participating, Web 3.0 is suggesting something else entirely: owning. This is the next and definitely most speculative frontier.
At its core, Web 3.0 is built on the idea of decentralization. So instead of big tech companies owning the platforms we use, technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies could allow communities to build, own, and govern their own digital spaces.
And this just begs a massive question. If the shift to the internet created Sepharad 4, could a shift to a decentralized internet create something fundamentally new? Could there be a Sepharad 5?
The most radical endpoint of this line of thinking is this concept of a network state. Now stick with me here. Imagine an online community that is so organized. It has its own social contract, its own cryptocurrency, even its own crowd-funded plots of land all around the world, that it could eventually seek and achieve diplomatic recognition. It would become a kind of digital First Nation.
And this slide kind of lays out a potential blueprint. It would start with an online society built around a shared mission, say preserving Ladino. Then, that community would grow, develop its own digital economy, crowdfund physical spaces to create a network archipelago, and finally, use its verifiable population to seek diplomatic recognition as an actual state.